This episode of Midco Sports Magazine is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Hello, welcome again to Midco Sports Magazine. It is football season, baby, and the pros, college, high school, pee-wees, everybody's rolling right now. And we've got two new original football stories, plus our Midco Mag Rewind. It's on former Sioux Falls Lincoln and Southwest Minnesota State star Gannon Moore, who traded the football field for the rugby pitch and is now playing at the highest level. And football or wrestling? That was the question for this young man from South Dakota. He is incredibly good at both, but for him, it came down to the best opportunity. We'll talk with Nash Hutmacher about his future as a Cornhusker. But we start out at Huron High School. At least that's where Bailey Schoenfelder started out as a really good but kind of under the radar football player. Where he is now and what has happened to him since he's been there is a really good story. Bailey Schoenfelder did a little bit of everything as an athlete at Huron High School. He played baseball and ran track and even rode bulls. He was a power lifter and won a state championship in wrestling.
Bailey Schoenfelder of Huron, your champion.
But football was his sport of choice because he got to hit people and because when it got down to it, he was a team player.
Wrestling didn't have that team aspect, that kind of cohesion where you got to have everybody working together. You kind of did your own thing in wrestling.
Huron has had some success in football in the last decade, but Tiger Stadium has not been a hotbed for college football recruiters. So Schoenfelder started to stand out as an individual in a team sport.
We kind of started turning around when I was in high school, but yeah, that was just kind of like me believing in myself and knowing I could get it done.
He played linebacker and running back and tight end for the Tigers and had scholarship offers at Division II schools and walk-on offers at Division I's. But as good as he was, he did not see football in his future.
I wasn't even planning on going to college after high school. I was just going to join the military, which is kind of like part of my whole backstory thing.
Schoenfelder had a friend in Huron who had already been accepted to the Marines, but was not yet on active duty.
He was a poolee, for the Marine Corps, and I'd go with him to workouts and stuff like that as a guest, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Recruiters were always there, and the more Bailey talked with them, the more he wanted to be in the military, or more precisely, a Navy SEAL. He signed up and took the physical. His lungs were great, eyes were good, muscles were in peak condition. But there was one problem.
I did my hearing test, because you go into the soundproof room and do the beep test and all that stuff, and about an hour later we were doing something else, and they came up to me and they wanted to check my ears. And so they go in and they're looking at my ears and no, that's fine. Had me redo it, and they're like, yeah, you're below the standard, and they're like, you're done. They just kicked me out.
The recruiters told him he could enlist again, but not for 2 years. Schoenfelder went to an ear doctor and they confirmed that prolonged exposure to loud environments had done nerve damage that hindered his hearing.
We had old tractors that don't have cabs, that you going 17 miles down the highway screaming, the motor's wide open, hunting and stuff like that, not using earplugs, all sorts of a combination of several things.
So for the time being, the military was not an option. He had gone from dead set on making that his future and had not given a thought to what he would do if it didn't happen.
I had zero backup plan. So I was kind of scrambling after that because that was the winter of my senior year of high school. So I kind of had to pick up the pieces pretty quick.
Schoenfelder's high school wrestling coach at Huron was a former Marine, and he had always had good advice for Bailey and did in this situation.
And he's like, yeah, that sucks, man, but you got to keep going and you got to keep that same mindset. You can't lose that, that Marine Corps, always going forward, press on mentality.
So Schoenfelder gave himself 24 hours to get over the rejection, and then he put a new plan in motion. He applied for college and got accepted at the University of Minnesota. He talked to the football team and worked out a way to join them as a walk-on, and that gave him a whole new sense of purpose.
The big thing behind joining the military was you're part of something bigger than yourself, part of a team, unit, working towards some greater purpose, and that kind of filled that gap for me, kind of filled that hole that was left when I got rejected from the military.
Schoenfelder joined the Gophers in 2016. He redshirted that first year and tried to make an impression on head coach Tracy Claeys. But in 2017, Minnesota hired P.J. Fleck as its new football coach, and Schoenfelder had to prove himself all over again.
I had started to get some credit with the old coaching staff, and then that's just gone. And you got new coaching staff coming in, and they're worried about so many other things not this like walk-on from South Dakota.
So he went back to the grind. He leaned on the ethics and the values that he grew up with. Outwork everybody else and prove that you belong. He recalls a grueling conditioning test during a Gopher team workout. 26 55-yard sprints with 30 seconds of rest in between.
And I won all 26 of those, and I remember like a couple weeks later, our special teams coach, Rob Wenger, he like came up to me and he's like, I saw what you're doing, I see you working and stuff like that, and like I see your like top end speed and stuff like that, and he's like, I'm gonna get you on teams. I feel like that's where I kind of got my foot in the door, and that's just what I've stuck to since then, and what I've tried to like instill in our younger guys too.
In the last 2 years on the field, Schoenfelder has earned a spot on the Gopher special teams. And he has earned something else, a reward that was delivered in a unique way in August of 2018.
We just got done like warming up like our pre-practice stuff. Two guys in like parachutes, like with smoke, colored smoke coming out the back, come like circling down into the stadium. I had no idea what was going on. Apparently everybody else had figured it out at that point. I had a gut feeling when they landed, and then they called Co. That's one of my best friends. They called him out to like with the envelope. I was like, okay, there might be something going on here. And then he like held up the piece of paper, and everybody lost it, and the rest is history. Then I still had to go through practice. That was a tough practice to go through. I couldn't breathe, man.
Schoenfelder says the scholarship has not and will not change his mindset. He says he knows he has to keep doing everything he can to make himself better every day. And if there's anything that anybody can learn from his story, it is this.
I would say the main thing to take away from what has happened to me and what I've done would come from Navy SEAL training, actually. They have a saying, never ring the bell. Because when guys drop out of buds, they have a bell that you have to ring, and you alert all the other recruits that you're done, and you set your helmet by the bell, and then everybody can see all the people that have quit that day or like since it began. And I would say, yeah, never ring the bell would be what I'd tell anybody that asked.
Up next, an update on former Sioux Falls, Lincoln, and Southwest Minnesota State football player Gannon Moore, who is now playing rugby at the highest level.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back. Time to rewind, and we're going to talk about a story we brought you first in April of 2016. It's about Gannon Moore, who was a great high school football player at Sioux Falls, Lincoln, great college football player at Southwest Minnesota State. But when he was done with football, he fell in love with rugby. And at the time, he had started his pursuit of making the U.S. Olympic team, and he just might get there in 2020. Here's the latest from Alex Heinert.
Since mid-June, Infinity Park in the Denver suburb of Glendale has served as home base for a select number of the top rugby players in the country. 31 members of this 50-man group will represent the U.S. and Japan this fall at the sport's greatest showpiece, the Men's Rugby World Cup. Among those vying for a spot is Gannon Moore, a 29-year-old college football star from Sioux Falls who's become a household name in American rugby circles.
The coaching staff and the players would tell you that this journey began more than a year ago, as far as as far as the players that they wanted to bring in, the structures and systems that have been in play have all been building for this Japan 2019.
Moore's transition from running back to rugger has him on the brink of reaching the pinnacle of the world's second most popular sport, and he's gone around the world and back to get there. After bursting on the scene as a dominant player at club level for the Kansas City Blues, Moore was squarely in the mix to make the U.S. Olympic team for the Rio Games in 2016, but the coaching staff would ultimately go in a different direction. Without a stable professional rugby league in the U.S. at the time, Moore felt the need to go abroad to round out his game and boost his chances of a future opportunity with Team USA.
I knew I needed to leave the U.S. to keep evolving my rugby, because it was quite limited.
His destination of choice? Rugby's spiritual home, the Pacific Island nation of New Zealand. Moving half a world away might have been intimidating to some, but not to Gannon. Even though he was based 7,800 miles from South Dakota, the laid-back life on the island nation suited him just fine.
It's the quiet life. Where I live, I'm about 30 minutes either direction. I can drive east or west, and I'm at the beach. So, pretty nice. I mean, I'm from Sioux Falls, and that's, home, but as far as taxes go, I'm in New Zealand. So then I went to New Zealand and then was playing for Silverdale Club Rugby, but then also playing for North Harbour, which plays in Mitre 10 Cup.
Playing professionally in one of the world's top rugby leagues gave Gannon the exposure and the opportunity he was hoping for.
That's what caused the interest within USA Rugby, because their coaches knew some of the coaches. That's the thing, worldwide the rugby community is quite small. You talk to someone in some other country and you're bound to know some of the same people. I was in New Zealand, way up north on the North Island, and then I have this message on my phone, and it was, hey, this is Greg McWilliams from USA Rugby. We need to talk. Give me a call back as soon as possible. This is on a Sunday in New Zealand, so it's like a day ahead anyways from here. And he says, can you be in Chicago on Wednesday? And I said yes. Like I said, went from about halfway around the world to then starting against New Zealand Māori All Blacks at Soldier Field in November.
Since earning his shot with Team USA at the end of 2018, Moore's star has continued to rise, highlighted by his first try for the national team against Canada in this summer's Pacific Nations Cup.
Gannon Moore, a second-half substitute. He's a strong body. You're not going to knock him off of his feet. A great line by the substitute winger. Look at the intensity there.
Any athlete's dream, no matter the sports, is to play, in your country's colors.
Despite a strong summer, Gannon knows his inclusion in the U.S. preliminary squad doesn't guarantee his spot on the roster for the World Cup. But whether or not he plays in Japan this fall, he's still gone further with a sport he picked up in high school than he ever would have imagined. And his rugby journey, well, it's still far from over.
I've got a few good years of solid rugby ahead of me. Ideally, I'd love to just be able to go back to New Zealand and play there. But I wouldn't be opposed to playing, like, whether in Europe or the UK or even Japan. So, who knows?
Well, unfortunately, Gannon did not make the final cut for the U.S. men's team, but you can still catch those guys at the end of September into October in the Men's Rugby World Cup in Japan.
Another football story still to come. Right now, he plays for the Cubs, but the polar bear is soon going to be a Cornhusker. We've got his story coming up. But first, the downside to early sports specialization in this week's Science of Sports.
Sports science is the use of scientific tools and methods to improve athletic health and performance. There's a growing trend for young athletes to begin and specialize in one sport at an early age. This is called early sports specialization. Early sports specialization can lead to burnout, isolation, and increase one's risk of overuse injuries. Being a multi-sport athlete is not only healthier, but helps individuals develop as a more well-rounded athlete. So young athletes should be given the opportunity to sample and play multiple sports as they're growing up. And that's going to lead to not only being a healthier athlete, but also increase your likelihood of success.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back. Nash Hutmacher could easily be a professional wrestler one of these days. He's got the nickname, he's got the knack, he's got the background to do it. But right now, Hutmacher is in his senior year of high school at Chamberlain, South Dakota. He is the best wrestler in his class in the United States. But when he gets to college, he's going to be a different kind of heavyweight at the University of Nebraska. Jason Andera has his story.
Big, bad, nasty Nash. 6 feet 5 inches, 300 plus pounds of muscle. Nash has always been the biggest kid on the block.
Sometimes we had to carry his birth certificate for baseball games.
He never had an awkward stage, where a lot of kids will go through that really awkward uncoordinated stage. I didn't really ever see that in Nash. He wasn't right-handed and he wasn't left-handed. He does some things left-handed, he does some things right-handed. I started to figure out, yeah, he's kind of a special kid when it comes to his physical gifts.
He's one of the most recognizable athletes in the state and has been for years. Most people know him because he's the heavyweight champ in South Dakota and has been since he was a freshman, something no one in the history of South Dakota wrestling has ever accomplished. When you're in that kind of rare air, it can be hard to set goals high enough.
As I got into middle school and started wrestling, high school wrestling, it was, I want to qualify for the state tournament. My 7th grade year, qualified for the state tournament. And then it went to, and I'm not even kidding you this, my 8th grade year on my goal sheet I put, I want to get top 5 at state, and I got 5th. So that next year it was, I want to be a state champ, and was a state champ. Just got to keep elevating them goals as you hit them. And then my goal was to win Folk Style Nationals, and I won Folk Style Nationals this year.
At last year's state wrestling tournament, Nash Hutmacher pinned Bo Foote in less time than it took Usain Bolt to run the fastest 100 meters in human history. He comes into the 1920 season as Flow Wrestling's #1 ranked heavyweight in the nation. You may have seen a few of the crazy things that Nash can do in a weight room. He can deadlift 585 pounds and follows it up with 42-inch box jumps. But if that's all you know about Nash, then you don't know Nash.
He's just a big teddy bear. He's just a gentle giant, always has been. Very caring about other people. If there was a fight happening on the playground, he'd try and break it up.
I like halftime when people say they could beat me up, I'm just like, yeah, you probably could. Like, I'm just like, whatever, you know, I don't really care what you're saying, but yeah, that's kind of how I handle it. I'm like, whatever about it.
What a lot of people don't see is the sacrifice, and that's what I'm most proud of with Nash. I mean, he goes out with his friends, he has fun, he goes out, does a lot of fishing, plays a little golf with his friends, but he sacrifices so much. Not going out to eat, staying out late with his friends. He goes to bed early so he makes sure he can get up and go work out.
So you'd figure the top wrestler in the nation would spend the summer before his senior year picking out a big-time college to wrestle at, right? Well, you don't know Nash.
I mean, obviously #1 wrestler in or heavyweight in the nation right now. All that. There's just football is, like I said, I've grown to love it more and more.
Down. Set hut.
Because before, you know, I'm supposed to block this guy, or just hit the guy in front of you and tackle the guy with the ball. But now it's, as I've started to figure out how the game is supposed to be played and everything, I love it, and it's just kind of taken over.
Nash admits wrestling was his first love, but it's football that he's focused on for the future. So Nash spent the summer narrowing his college choices to Oregon, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. And one of the hottest questions across the state this summer was, where's Nash going to go?
People wouldn't believe that. They would ask me, so what's he going to do? Where's Nash going to go? And I said, I don't know. I said, he hasn't said, and they'll be like, come on, you have to know, you're his dad. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I don't know.
After an exhilarating yet exhausting search for a college, Nash made his decision, and in typical Nash fashion, didn't do it the way you'd expect.
I was standing in the bathroom shaving, and he poked his head in the bathroom and said, hey Dad, I'm gonna be a Cornhusker.
Like when I was down there with the guys down there, they just all seemed like people that I've hung out with before,
There's a lot of work ahead for this young star, but he's got a very good head on a very good set of shoulders. Plenty of football fans are about to know Nash.
I am so proud of him. I mean, I don't know many kids that get up early, go to the weight room, go to work all day, come home and say, oh, I better mow.
Let's go, keep it loud over here, keep it loud, let's go!
I've talked to some other parents that their kids have had a lot of success athletically. And, it's not all a bed of roses. Sometimes they need a little push, sometimes they need a little help, but with Nash, it was never fighting him to go to a workout or anything like that. If anything, a lot of the time he would, hey Dad, we better get going, we need to get to the gym, you know, he would push me.
I can't thank them enough, obviously, for everything that they've done to make me the person I am today. They helped and support me so much, and even with making this college decision, they were never told me where they wanted me to go. They were always like, we're just gonna help set you up with, the best opportunity to figure out where it is you wanna go.
And joined by Jason and Dara. And the first thing is, how much fun have you had covering Nash over the last couple of years?
One of the best individuals, but obviously one of the best athletes that we're ever going to see in South Dakota high school sports. And it's truly an honor to meet somebody like that who really lives up to the hype.
His nickname is one of the best ever. It fits him perfectly. What is it?
The polar bear. This has really started to gain some traction. The interesting part, though, is there's competing stories on how he got this nickname. So you've got one of the wrestling parents who said, I gave him that nickname. I just called him my little polar bear. You see that white hair, you see that big burly body of his, and it just matches, right? But then his middle school wrestling coach also said he came up with the polar bear. So there's competing stories, but if two people come up with a nickname that's the same, it fits really well.
It is perfect. And his dad, Joe, is trying to get a little slogan going that has to deal with Nebraska's head coach.
It just makes sense, right? The polar bear belongs in the land of Frost with Coach Frost at Nebraska. So I think Joe nailed that one.
All right. Nice work, buddy.
You bet.
Jason and Darren.
Thanks for watching Midco Sports Magazine. You can find this episode and all episodes on YouTube and IGTV.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.